Well, thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. I have spoken for Friends of Furneaux Creek before. I think it was a iNaturalist talk a couple of years back. And anyway, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you again today. The other thing I want to thank you all for is your commitment to nature. I've not been to Furneaux Creek. I know I'm close by, but Leela's closer, and my car always seems to turn toward Leela as I, head that way. But I do appreciate all the volunteerism, all the care and love that you folks give to our natural habitat within the urban environment. It is quite important, and there again, I'm just really honored to be able to share with you what's one of my great loves, and I have done many at Leela. And I look forward to coming out to Furneaux Creek and looking for some dragonflies and damselflies, because I'm sure that there's some there that I've not seen at Leela. So thank you very much for this opportunity tonight. After this meeting, if anybody does want to get in contact with me, feel free to reach out to the organizer of this event. Ask for my email. I freely give that out. Would be happy to share with anybody. It's just my great love other than working. So tonight we're going to talk Damsels and Dragons, flies that is. Little background about myself. I started, I've always liked photography since digital photography first became available to the public. I went to India, spent about 4 months in India, and I bought my first digital camera to take that trip, and literally fell in love. So several years later, I did discover Leela here in Lewisville, Texas. That's Lewisville Lake Environmental Learning Area. And of course, it just became a natural for me to start taking pictures of just about anything that moved. It took me quite a few years to get into plants, and I'm still not very well versed in plants, but I do photograph anything and everything. But it didn't take long till I really started to focus on these dragonflies. They are so colorful. They are so varied in shape and size and markings. I kind of call them the NASCAR of the insect world, because they tend to be painted all these bright colors and things, much like a NASCAR race car. So that's my little personal saying, is they're the NASCAR of the insect world, and they are extremely fast. So anyway, so we'll move on here. Let's see. We're going to talk a little bit about the history, a general description, anatomy, finding odonates. Of course, you guys have a great area. Probably already see quite a few odonates along Furneaux Creek. They spend most of their life in an aquatic state as a nymph. The great majority of their lifespan is as a aquatic animal. So, I just can't imagine not seeing a lot there along Furneaux Creek. If you're not, we probably got a real serious problem with your water quality. Anyway, getting off track, anatomy, where to find them, how to identify odonates, and odonate photography. Now, I'm not going down this list, ABC, 1, 2, 3. Once I start talking about odonates, I get so excited. They just do that to me, that I'm going to try to include a little bit of each of these topics within what I talk about today. I will be showing photographs of different species doing different things like feeding or mating or laying eggs, which is called ovipositing. So, I may jump around, but I think, that makes a really good presentation, because, it's not only the technical knowledge that I try to pass along, it's the excitement. It's the love for that particular species of animals. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it tonight. The next slide here I'm showing is talking about the history of the dragonflies. I'm not sure if you're aware, but dragonflies are probably one of the oldest insects that are still living today. This particular fossil you see on the right was found in France or Europe. It is displayed in a major natural history museum in France at the moment. It's called Meganura monyi. And this particular dragonfly lived between 300 and 350 million years ago. So it is quite an old species. And today, about the only difference we see between today's dragonflies flying around Furneaux Creek or Leela or anywhere you see them, about the only difference is size. The anatomy is still the same, the eye structure, the head, the wings, the abdomen and thorax. It's an identical, it's just grown smaller in size. Over on the left, we're getting a comparison and an artist rendition of that 300 million year old fossil. And as you can see, the artist rendition based upon that fossil, you can see one out at Furneaux Creek looks like that, a small one, and wouldn't think it was ancient. It's just virtually unchanged from what we see today. There in the lower right of that photograph on the left, you see the typical or average height of a human body or size, and you can see the comparison to Meganura monyi, quite a huge dragonfly. And I will tell you, there's such voracious predators that if we had dragonflies 30 inches wide, we would really be endangered as the human species. I mean, these are voracious carnivores and just unrelenting. I mean, that's one of the things I find fascinating about them. But let's all be thankful they're small now. They're not very big. I have been bitten by a common green darner before, and they can bite pretty hard. I mean, common green darners about 5-inch wingspan. One flew in my car up against the front window, so I reached up and grabbed it to get it back out of the car before it, cooked in that window. And as I was, moving it to the window, it actually bit me in the palm of the hand, and you could see a mark that it left. Now, they don't attack humans. I don't mean to make you afraid, but I'm just telling you, they are formidable, and they're equipped to be, the critter they are. Some of the general descriptions, one of the things that I find fascinating, and you probably might not have noticed in the past, but probably I hope you will going forward, is we have generally you see them when they're perching or not flying. I mean, we see them flying, but we don't get a good look at them because they fly so fast. Most of the time when you identify a dragonfly, it's going to be perched. It's going to be stopped and resting, or stopped and kind of watching for new prey. And different species have totally different modus operandi of how they spend their time and day or how they hunt. Here on the left, this is a very beautiful species of dragonfly, and you probably will see some of these around Furneaux Creek. It's called let me get my laser pointer on here. Let's see here, laser pointer. The one on the left is called a flagtail spiny leg. Now, the reason that I show this one is it is in a horizontal perch. Its body is horizontal to the ground, okay? Over on the right is another very, very common dragonfly. I'd be shocked if you don't see it at Furneaux Creek, and this is called the common green darner. Common green darners are very green in the thorax area. We'll kind of go over this anatomy here in another minute. They have really beautiful wings, have a little bit of gold on the leading edge. And one of the most unique features of this dragonfly is the top of its mandibles, what we call the fronds, just above my laser pointer there. And that looks like an eyeball. And we call that the third eye. It's not an eyeball, it's just a marking, but it almost makes this dragonfly look like a cyclops. So common green darner. It is one of the larger dragonflies you will see commonly. There's a couple other that are bigger in our area, but they're not as commonly seen because they spend time up in the thicker forest or more shaded areas and are just not as obvious to the common observer. One other thing I want to kind of talk about this particular one on the right is this is what we call a pruinos. It's a very, very fresh, or not pruinos, that's not the word. Term escapes me. I'm sure I'll remember after I end the meeting. But this dragonfly is only a matter of hours old, probably less than an hour. I'm thinking based on when I observed this, probably about 10 to 15 minutes, this had just metamorphed from its nymph stage, aquatic stage. And what they do is they climb out on a limb, much like a cicada does, climbs out of the ground, climbs up onto your garden hoe or your screen door, and then it proceeds to burst out of the back of its exuvate, which is its exoskeleton. And once it comes out of that exoskeleton, it no longer looks like a little bug with no wings or anything. It actually fills out the wings and becomes the flying dragonfly that you and I see most commonly. So this one is only a matter of hours old. The way I can tell in comparison, the wings are very, very shiny. The body is very, very vivid in color. It's indicating that it's essentially wet. It's just, much like a butterfly. I'm not sure if you've ever seen a butterfly go through metamorphosis, but when they come out of the pupae, they're almost a wet looking. So what they do is they hang on and they actually pump their wings full of fluid, which causes them to expand out to their full extent. And then that fluid, the wings start to harden in the sun and allows them to take flight as an adult butterfly. So this one on the right is a hanging perch, and that's the way this particular species always perches. Anytime you see it, it will be hanging like this. That allows for a beautiful dorsal shot. I mean, I love taking these shots because you can see all four wings. The other is the horizontal perch, which is what we see here in the flagtail spiny leg. About dragonflies, most of their common names have been given in the United States in fairly recent history. All these species, like any other species on Earth, are technically or officially named a Latin name. I've heard rumors from some of the old timers and some of the academics that a lot of the American dragonflies were named over a 12-pack of beer. That a couple of, college students said, people are never going to start really paying attention to these or being able to get very interested if they have to be thinking of what it's called in Latin. So they sit down with a 12-pack of beer and they started naming them based on prominent features of the species. And so in this case, this one is the flagtail spiny leg. Is a very good example of that. It has absolutely monstrous back legs here. Those are the largest back legs of any dragonfly on Earth. I mean, they're just, compared to its first and second pair of legs, these hind legs are they're gargantuan. Also, I'm not sure if you can see, if you're on a phone, probably not, but if you're on a desktop, you may be able to. Along the bottom of this hind leg are these gigantic spines. They all have spines. That's what allows them to grab hold of prey and fly through the air with them and consume them. But the flagtail spiny leg, and spiny leg well-deserved, got his name just from his looks. So many dragonflies, if you're ever having a hard time IDing them, look at the prominent features and say, wow, it's got rings on its tail. Well, it's probably going to be an eastern ringtail. Just a little hint there. That doesn't always work, but once you start to learn them, you'll start to say, oh, that's why they call it that. Common names. Flight. A little bit more about anatomy here is this is the first pair of dragonflies flying through the air that I ever took. And not only are they flying, they're in the act of mating as they fly. This is down on the Rio Grande River along McAllen. And this is the pair of what we call wandering gliders. Very widely dispersed species, find them anywhere in the United States. But the thing I wanted to show here are the wings. Dragonflies have two pairs of wings. They have a front pair, and notice that's a little slimmer. And they have a rear pair, which is a little wider across there. Well, one of the things that makes them such awesome flight specialists is those wings can move independently of each other. Unlike a bird that typically flies, you know, either both wings are down or both wings are up, or they're both moving up and down at the same time in conjunction. A dragonfly can move each of those totally independent of the other, which gives them just extreme agility when chasing down prey. In fact, once they lay eyes on prey, they very rarely miss what they're going for. They're just extremely fast. Now, not only do they move up and down independently, those wings can tilt forward and backward independently. So I might be turning my wings this way or that way, or both together, or flapping one up and one down. So it's amazing flight within the insect world. They can fly, a dragonfly, quite fast. They can go about 100 body lengths per second. So you figure if that dragonfly is, say, maybe 4 inches long, he can go about 400 inches in a second. So extremely fast, extremely effective predator. I'm going to go ahead and show it on this slide. Is the different body parts. This front part here looks like the face. That is pretty much all mandible or mouth. They have very large, prominent mouth parts. They are very rigid. They're very sharp. Don't mean to make anybody afraid. They don't bite people unless you grab them and hold them in your hand, and it's not sharp enough they're going to break skin or anything. But those jaws are deadly to any creature that's their size or smaller. I mean, I've watched them eat amazing things. In fact, it's kind of sad to say, but there's a picture on the internet where one of these dragonflies is actually eating a very small hummingbird, which is bigger than it. So these guys are deadly to things their size or smaller. So that's the mandibles, the mouth parts. Of course, the eyeballs. I'm going to come back and talk about the eyes here. Next slide. It's a fascinating eye. Another reason they're such great predators. This next part behind the head is the thorax. Okay, and thorax on most dragonflies are where we get a lot of really unique markings, striping patterns, colors, things like that. Those are one of the primary field markers for determining what species you're looking at. Now, this species here is a rather drab, it's not remarkable in markings and things. That's one of the ways we know it's a wandering glider. It just, because it's plain. Most others are not plain, do have very distinctive within the species, distinctive markings, colors, stripes, things like that. This last part right behind the thorax, you see the male here has got his abdomen, and it's been around, and he has some what we call sexual appendages here, where he has grabbed hold of that female's neck right behind the head, and he's holding her in maybe not a death grip, but she's not going anywhere until he lets go. So he grabs the female by the head. The female curls her abdomen up to what we call the male's secondary appendages or sexual parts. And that's where the transfer of sperm sac occurs And some species, like wandering glider, they actually do this while they're flying through the air, and they do it while they're flying just extremely fast. I'm still amazed I ever got this picture, and it's actually the first picture I ever got with my current camera set. So it's just, I still look at this in total awe. I'm just lucky and blessed to have gotten the image. So a little bit about anatomy. We've got our wings independently moving, independently tilting. We have our abdomens. We have our eyes and head with our mouth parts, the mandible, and our thorax, okay? So a little bit about flight and anatomy. Here is a dorsal view of a dragonfly's eyes. This is a species you will not see in Texas. A good friend of mine, Steve Valley, up in Oregon, took a picture of this. He is a PhD and does study insects with a specialty in dragonflies. This was taken under a very, very expensive, not a microscope, I forget how he describes it, but this is a very specialized photographic instrument that they have there at the University of Oregon. These eyes, when you first look at them, and if you look at my pictures, you're not seeing this kind of dotted detail here, but it looks like two eyeballs, okay? We have two main eyes. This up here is the mouth parts or mandibles. There's some other descriptive parts and pieces here I won't get into, but the eyes. Actually, each eye is made up of multiple lenses, and all these lenses feed into the same receptor area of the brain to formulate a near, 360-degree image. So it's got a lot of lenses within its eye. It's a compound eye. There's about 24,000 ommatidae, which is the lens. There's about 24,000 in each one of these eyes. Okay, so the vision, somebody asked it, what does it look like to a dragonfly? I said, well, I'm not one, and I cannot imagine having 48,000 lenses feeding into my brain to make one image. It's just incredible. But combining that flight, those strong wings, and combining this incredible eye structure, these dragonflies, you're not going to sneak up on them. If you do, they're letting you, because they know that you can get within an inch, and if you try to grab them, they're going to be gone. So dragonflies are hard to sneak up on. Little tip for photography or viewing: if you're ever approaching one slow and steady and it flies off, just freeze. Just absolutely freeze. Don't move. 9 times out of 10, the dragonfly will come back to exactly the twig that you saw it on to begin with. They tend to have preferences from where they perch, and they perch where they can see things the best as far as dinner. Anyway, just a fascinating eye. I don't know of any others really like this. I think flies have multi-lensed eyes. I'm not an insect expert. I'm certainly not trained in biology, but I don't think we have any other insects that have like 48,000. I've got somebody in the waiting room. Let me admit her. That's coming up now so I can see it. Okay, so that's the eye of the dragonfly. We did have a question Thursday with Texas Master Naturalists about these small antennae here. And from what I know, these are just vestigial appendages that they serve no purpose in today's current species. But at one time in their life, they probably were longer, more pronounced, and did serve some specific function to the critters. But these are vestigial at this time. Now, also, like I said, I'm not an academic. I've never studied this. I had a little biology, little pre-med in college. Didn't follow through on either one of those. Got into IT and in business. But I certainly don't ever have my feelings hurt if anyone corrects me. So anyway, the next item here we have, let's see. get us back in here. Here we go. Feeding. You know, I've taught several times or mentioned more than once here about them being predators. This is an eastern pond hawk, and this is a young male. Eastern pond hawks all will have a very green eyes and mouth parts. I mean, it's just a good characteristic. They all have very dark black legs. The males, and this is a young male, he has a very light blue coloration. The thing that tells me that this is an adolescent or a very young male is that there's still a faint visual of green here on his thorax. When these are first born, they're primarily green in the thorax, and they're kind of black and white along the abdomen here. But as they age, the male ages, they turn color, and it's kind of a waxy type substance that builds up on them that will turn them blue. And a fully mature male will be just this same powdery blue all over the thorax and abdomen, okay? And the reason I know it's a male is I talked about the males grabbing the female behind the head or the neck. You can see very prominent here. These are hard to catch in a photograph, but there's two little white, almost like fingers coming off the end of the abdomen. Those are what he uses to clamp down on the back of the neck and lock her in and hold her while they mate. And the reason he does that, and the reason they're built to hook up the way they do, is to prevent other males from interfering. So once a male grabs that female, she's pretty much at his mercy, and she pretty much doesn't have any choice about what's about to transpire. Rather brutal, but that's the insect world. That's their particular nature. Here he's eating looks like a small skipper butterfly. This is out on what we call the Lerf ponds at Lila, but a very small butterfly. And that's probably the most common prey for most dragonflies, or something in this size range. They grab them flying through the air, they nail them, and then they consume them pretty quick, and they're back up in the air feeding again. Sometimes they feed in the air without even stopping. They just don't land. They actually can eat mosquitoes by the hundreds while they're zipping through the air, and they can do that as long as there's daylight out. Here is the female eastern pond hawk, and you can see quite a difference. Male is blue, female is this bright chartreuse green. There again, her abdomen starts to show that green, but kind of turns to a white and black pattern. Okay, so she's one of the few dragonflies where the females, I think, are actually much more beautiful than the male. I mean, she's flashy. That's a NASCAR car. I mean, you know, all that chartreuse. But she's a beautiful. And these are very, very common. You know, keep your eyes peeled for this flashing green out at Friends of Furneaux or Furneaux Creek, because this is one of the most common dragonflies in North Texas. I mean, you just can't go to Lila without seeing these things. They're always there as long as it's spring, summer, and early fall, and there's sunshine. You're going to see them. I wanted to show this one because of her feeding pattern. She's actually feeding on a young male eastern pond hawk. See that little faint patch of green along what used to be the abdomen? The front half of the thorax. The front half of the thorax has already been consumed, as well as the eyes and the mouth parts. The entire head and half the thorax has been consumed, probably in a matter of minutes. But you do see the faint green indicating a very young male, and the blue abdomen here, and it's male because it's really not developed his appendages yet either. So that's another sign that he's very young. Eastern pond hawks are one of the most common cannibals within the species. They're just voracious, and it's not uncommon if you pay attention when you see them. quite often, if you look very close, they're eating something, and it quite often is one of their own, as well as other dragonflies and damselflies. So, damselflies, we didn't talk about them much. I'd like to talk about the anatomy a little bit, but the dragons perch with their wings spread out, always spread out. They might raise them above their body, some like this, especially if it's windy, and they use that to balance on a perch. I don't know if you can see my face there on the right, but they spread their wings, and typically, since they have four wings, it'd be more like that. But anyway, damselflies have much more dainty wings, and they're both, both pair are pretty much the same size, whereas the dragons was a smaller, thinner pair up front and a very large pair behind. The damselflies are much more dainty. They don't fly near as fast, something like 20 body lengths per second. If that, most don't do that, even that fast, but they're much daintier. You can see here the abdomens are very thin, almost like a pencil or thinner. I often describe, when I'm talking about photography, taking a picture of a damselfly is sometimes about as hard as taking a picture of a strand of hair blowing in a high wind. They're just really hard to focus on because they are so small. But anyway, this is a pair of springwater dancers. I believe it is. I may be wrong. Damsels are much harder to ID. Spent quite a bit of time doing that in the past, but I kind of gave up. It's just time consuming, and most species look so much like the others that it's just really hard to do. And I find dragons just more fascinating to watch, that speed and that, maneuverability. This is a video of them mating, and watch how the female folds up that abdomen, and they actually hook up to the male's secondary appendages. Now, what he is doing, he is actually, and this may not be suitable for teenagers, but he's inserting a sperm packet within her receptor, meaning that as they're mating, he's not actually fertilizing her eggs. He's depositing a sac of sperm. And so, and I don't even know if that's the right term in dragonflies, but the male fertility. But anyway, he's pumping. You can see that motion there, that he is inserting that. Now, she can either fertilize right away, or she might carry that sac for days or maybe even a week. It's selective fertilization based on the female, and I'm not sure what triggers when she does it or why she does it, but that is different from a lot of, especially dragonflies. They tend to mate, fertilize in what we call oviposit, all relatively short time. But damselflies are really unique in this, and I apologize, but I'm not studied up on it enough to explain it really accurately. But I did think that was a cool video that I actually caught that happening. So that's the damselfly mating. This picture, one of my favorite pictures, this is a pair of the eastern pond hawks, or not eastern pond hawk, the common green darner, and they're on a pickerel weed, which is an aquatic plant. It's quite invasive, so don't ever think, oh, how pretty, and put this in your yard pond or anything, because it's extremely invasive. But it was being studied at the Lair ponds scientifically, and so we see a lot of it out there, and it is beautiful, but it is very fast-growing invasive. But here we see the male, very fancy colored, very bright and flashy. Female, much more subdued in color, very similar to what most birds, sex species sex show. But here the male, you got a pretty good view again of him wrapping around there, grabbing her by the back of the neck. And here she is folding up her uh, abdomen to receive the fertilization. Now, as I spoke, the damselflies have that selective fertilization. You may mate, but she might not fertilize those eggs for quite some time after mating. Typically, oh, did I take that picture out? I think I did. Anyway, let's see here. Let's go one more. Yeah. So that very same pair of common green darners over there, you saw them mating. He was depositing, in the sperm sac, but he still hangs on. Once they finish breeding, he actually hangs on, and this is to prevent other males from depositing also. He's like, man, this is mine. She's going to have my babies. So once they've mated, they fly over and they land on a piece of vegetation to where she can actually dip her appendage down into the water. And this is where she is actually laying her fertilized eggs in the pond. These common green darners you'll see around ponds, very rarely around creeks or running streams. They like still ponds and marshes, things like that. I don't think they do too much in big lakes, but usually smaller ponds and marshes. So that's kind of from breeding to ovipositing of a single species. If you've ever noticed, if you have a garden pond, I commend you. I don't have enough room in my yard. But if you don't have one and you have room, boy, these things are great, man. You get all kinds of stuff on a garden pond. The thing I want to show here, let's see here, get this to run. This should be a little video. Okay, let's go back up. I've been having a little trouble with my videos, so I apologize about that, team. Let me see. Anyway, what that was is that's a picture, and you can't see it because it's kind of blurred out. It's a little distant. But if you ever see a dragonfly where it's flying along and will dip into the water, almost like trying to splash the water, okay? And you'll see that it'll fly along, and then it'll, bam, hit the water with the end of its abdomen. That's also a method of ovipositing. They're actually laying eggs into that water when you see that particular see that happening. So that's another mode of ovipositing or egg laying. Sorry the video didn't play. I will tell you on YouTube, if you go into YouTube and type in dragonfly, you're going to see all kinds of neat videos of different things that dragonflies do, and this one is one of them. So anyway. The next one here is one that we have at Leela. I'm not sure about Furneaux Creek because I've not been there. But these little guys, these are what we call stream bluets, and they are usually in little slow-running streams, little not deep creeks, little gurgling water, and very heavy forest canopy where it's usually pretty dark. I just got lucky to get this picture when a beam of sun kind of broke through the canopy to illuminate them. But these stream bluets, one of the reasons they're called stream bluets is that they do spend most of their time around this type of a stream, and they do spend most of their life as a nymph in this stream and as adults feeding on mosquitoes and things around a stream. So they spend almost all their life around a stream, and that's why they got the stream bluet. Bluet is a family that holds their wings a particular way. So there are several different species of bluets. But here you see a male, and unlike many others, they actually balance themselves, still maintaining that grip on the female as she dips her abdomen in the water to deposit those fertilized eggs. So this is one that usually does the fertilization pretty immediately after breeding. It doesn't do that selective fertilization. So he's got a grip there, and he's just balanced as perfect as can be, wings extended. The reason he does this again is to keep other males from flying in here and trying to breed with her. He's going to hold on to her till he knows she is deposited his fertilized, or her eggs fertilized by him. Now here you can see there's actually 3 pair in this picture. Here's one male, here's another female who is, you can actually see a little bitty egg, that little white dot there at the tip of her abdomen, and she's about to dip that in the water. And over here, the third one, you can't really see it. He's kind of a dark body because of the lighting. But as he's kind of facing us, and you can see the 2 eyeballs and the mouth part here, but he's balanced on a third female. The day we took this picture, I was with Lawrence Brennan. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him, or he was actually awarded a volunteer award from President Obama. Larry's put in literally tens of thousands of hours at Leela and Texas Master Naturalist, and he and I were photographing together this day. There were over a dozen pair right here in this small little stream along this little, I think that was a log there, and water was gurgling over it. Just an absolute beautiful scene. And I don't think I've seen this since, but it is a very, very poignant display of nature, I thought. So, it's easy to get excited when you really look small and notice God's wonders. So there's the common green darners again. And here is the nymph. I don't have a lot of photographs of nymphs, and this is not one of mine, but the reason I don't is I don't take pictures underwater. I have seen a few nymphs when I've been out with students from UNT or some of the Louisville high school kids when they're doing water sampling, and we take nets and run it along the bottom of the river or ponds, and sometimes we do get different nymphs. I can't identify them by what they look like because I've not seen that many. There are some academic books out there, and that's one of the things I plan on studying as I slow down on my hiking and physical abilities. But here is a nymph, and quite large. It's 3 pairs of legs, just like the dragonfly. And these are much like a caterpillar is to a butterfly. But these guys will stay underwater anywhere from 2 to 7 years. I mean, it's a prolonged period of time. Another reason that they're an extremely good indicator of water quality is when you spend most of your life as a nymph, or kind of, I consider it like a baby, you spend most of that life in water. It doesn't take much bad water till you're not going to survive to become an adult flying dragon or damsel. So very good indicators of water quality. If you guys out at Furneaux Creek are just not seeing any dragonflies, you might want to check with your agriculture department, Texas A&M, or any things like that. Maybe get a water sample testing. But typically, I think you're going to see those. I mean, these are pretty hardy animals, but there again, in a period of 2 to 7 years, it doesn't take much poison or contaminant to end that life before we start seeing dragonflies. So they are a great indicator of the quality of the water that you're observing or seeing or close to. Okay, let's admit. I just admitted someone else there. I didn't catch the name. The dragonfly here, one of the other things you can see right here, just the beginnings of wings. Now, these wings don't really grow like out or anything as the nymph stage. They're contained within the exudae, or that exoskeleton, and they don't really extend out and fill full of fluid and harden until they actually go through that metamorphosis stage. We call it emerging. Also, they have an extendable lower jaw. It's hard to see, I'm sure, but right along here, it almost looks like an arm or an elbow back here. This is actually the lower jaw of this nymph. And when they go to catch prey, I don't know if any of y'all remember the horror movie, that space movie called Aliens. You remember how that the monster in that show had that, it would open its mouth up like this, and then it had like a tongue that had a mouth and teeth on it that would project out and, you know, kill the person. Almost the exact same thing on this creature here. That lower jaw protrudes out the length here, which that's, you know, that's a good length out from the body, more than the head. And it has like pincers on the end of it and grabs the prey and yanks it back to its mouth. There again, if you go to YouTube and you type in dragonfly nymph, it's one of the first videos they will show you is a nymph catching, I can't remember what it was, but a little aquatic creature. And they even eat fish as big as they are. But it's really scary. I mean, that is, I don't know much of anything. The only thing I can compare it to is a frog with that sticky tongue that shoots out and sucks that prey back into his mouth. Well, this thing here, his bottom jaw jerks out and he grabs that prey and yanks it back to the mouth and consumes it. So even as a baby, these things are, they're just voracious. They're predators all the way, start to finish. Let's see here if I can move on. Okay, talk a little bit about the photography. Great thing about digital photography, it's allowed everybody to take as many pictures as you want with not all the expense. It's pretty much buy the camera and that's it. Today, everyone just about carries a cell phone, and almost every cell phone has a built-in camera. And I'll tell you, these built-in cameras are extraordinary. I mean, they are really, really nice. I only carry my big DSLR or my big Canon camera to use a huge telephoto lens on it. If I'm going to take a beautiful landscape picture, say of the Grand Canyon, I'm using my cell phone because it's incredible on landscape photography. One of the reasons that it's not really good, just a cell phone by itself for a dragonfly, is to really get good detail, you're going to have to get very, very close to that dragonfly. And remember how we talked about the incredible eyesight, and it's almost 360-degree vision that it has, and it can turn its head, almost 362. It's incredible to watch them. But it's hard to get up close enough to a dragonfly to get any kind of good detail or focus with a plain cell phone. So what I did last week is I just bought this, and I've still not had time to play with it extensively enough to really recommend it. But I bought a lens kit. These are lenses that you can attach to the cell phone camera that allow it to do a lot of incredible things. Like my first point and shoot camera with a lot of zoom was a 50x or 50 times normal vision zoom. Well, within this little kit that I bought, this lens right here is like a telescope, and it has a little clip that you use to attach it to the cell phone camera. And that telephoto lens is like 22x. So that gets out there pretty good. And I think it's good enough that you can get within, 8 to 10 feet of a dragonfly, move very slow, very deliberate, not any jerky motion. You can get within 10 to 8 feet of a dragonfly if you try. And like I said, if he flies off, just freeze. Chances are he'll come back to exactly the same plant or flower or stick that you were looking at him on. So a little hint there. So I can take this 22x lens, hook it up to this phone, and I can get some pretty incredible shots standing 10 to 20 feet away from a butterfly or a dragonfly or a variety of things. There are a lot of different kits out there. I can't recommend really any of them. I just know that the build quality on this one looks to be pretty good. I spent $38 on Amazon.com. It also comes with what we call a 25x macro lens, where if I have an ant or something in a Petri dish, I can put my phone right down close to it, and it magnifies like I'm having under a microscope. It is incredible the detail you can get on something as small as an ant or a fly. If you can get up close enough to it, it's not moving. Usually I would have to, for a macro like this, I'd try to catch something in a Petri dish to keep it still while I get that close. But it's pretty incredible. And then it also comes with a super wide angle lens. Like if you were at the Grand Canyon, you can pop it onto your camera. And instead of you seeing like what you're seeing here of Mike Fox, it might include in the picture twice what you're seeing right here. It makes your field of vision on a photograph larger than just the plain phone. Not magnifying, but just increasing the width of what it's taking in. So $38, you get a little tripod, you get a little clip that holds your phone onto the tripod, you get the clip that holds the lens to the phone camera. $38, a lot of them out there. I'm going to try to go through and review some of them. But that's the cheapest way to get into taking photographs of dragonflies or other small objects in nature without having to be an extremely stealthy ninja to get up within inches of them. The next I used, this was my favorite camera forever. I got this years ago. It's a Canon SX50HS. It is a point and shoot camera, which is the easiest type of camera for a beginner or a novice or just plain amateur. If you really just want to get good images and not fool with trying to learn everything about a camera, if your primary focus is how can I get the prettiest picture of this particular animal, point and shoots are fantastic. You can spend anywhere from $300 or $400 up to about $1,000, and they are phenomenal. A $900 Nikon P900 rivals my big DSLR camera, which I spent about $2,000 for it and the lens combined. But they are phenomenal, easy to use. Set them on automatic point and shoot. Show two pictures of this one. This is with the lens cap on. It's turned off. It's a normal looking point and shoot camera. Not real huge. It's not a pocket camera, but it's not really big at all. It's about half the size of my Canon 7D Mark II. When you push the telephoto lens, and you can go as far as as much as you want, it's fully adjustable. It's automatic. There's a little button you push, and it makes the lens go out or the lens come in. So there's none of this, cranking it by hand or manual type work. But this thing goes up to 1,200 millimeters, which is about 50 times the normal shot like you would get within this. That's huge. You can take a picture across the street from you and almost look like you're standing there right against, say, a bird or something. If you're taking a picture of a butterfly or dragonfly in your garden, you're within 15 feet of it. When you zoom in 1,200, it's like you can see the hair on it. I mean, it's just an incredible. Little SX50 you can still find out there some places. I found them as cheap as $150. Highly recommend this. And I know several professional photographers that carry these in the glove box of their car as like a Old Faithful backup. So very, very good way to get into it if you're a little more serious or avid fan than just the plain cell phone. These are incredible. This is what I call my big rig. I love this thing. It took me a while to talk my wife into letting me buy it, but I did convince her it was still cheaper than golfing every Saturday with her girlfriend's husbands who, gamble quite heavily on the golf course. I said, I saved a ton of money just, buying this one thing, and the rest of it's free. This is a Canon 7D Mark II, probably the premier wildlife camera from Canon. It is a crop sensor, which means when I take a normal picture, it's a little bit larger coming out of this or more zoomed in than, say, their full frame cameras. It is extremely high speed number of frames per second. It does 11 frames per second. Some of the newer ones out are getting a little faster than this, but for a long time, this was the fastest number of frames per second, meaning if I pull the trigger down or pull the shutter button down and hold it for 1 second, this thing's going to fire off 11 photographs. So if I see a bird that's perched and I see that it's about to take off, I can push this button and just hold it down. And it's almost like time-lapse photography. I get, this beautiful series of a bird spreading its wings and flapping and taking off out across the prairie or whatever. But it's incredible. It's really great sports photography too, because it shoots so fast. You can get your grandson or kiddos or your favorite football player, incredible shots of them moving in action, just bam, 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 bam. This is a Tamron 150 to 600 millimeter lens. This is about the most affordable big zoom lens you can buy. If you get into Canon, they don't have a 600, they have a 500. They may have, I'm not aware of, but they know they have a 500 millimeter. But they're much more expensive. This thing here about $1,200, $1,100 retail. Does an excellent job. It's sturdy built. It's good. It's just a really nice lens. But $1,100 compared to, say, their 400 millimeter, which is not near as much, Canons, running about $2,000. Canon has an 800 millimeter lens that's running about $4,000. So this is like anything else. You can spend as much as you want on that hobby, and of course you get what you purchase. But this is probably, for the dollar, one of the best lenses you can. It goes from 150 millimeters, zooms all the way out to like a 600 millimeter. That gets you up pretty darn close to the critter you're trying to take pictures of. It is very heavy. This thing's over 10 pounds. As I get older, I'm starting to go back to carrying that little point and shoot, which doesn't weigh hardly a pound. But this is a phenomenal. This is what most of the photos you've seen tonight I've taken with this DSLR with the Tamron 150 to 600 millimeter lens. Last thing I want to talk about, and I don't have my eye on the clock team, so if I'm running over, y'all just speak up and tell me. But the resources and how do I identify these dragonflies? Well, I started off years ago with, field guides, very nice field guides. I don't know if you folks, some of you are in birding, and some of you are in insects. So, field guides may be familiar to you, but I started off with Dragonflies and Damselflies of the West by Dr. Dennis Paulson. Dennis, I've met him before, Facebook friends, we're INET friends. Dennis is just world renowned in the dragonfly academic world. Let's see here. Let me let Laurie Foster just joined. But anyway, Dennis Paulson, really well known. I'm really fortunate to have met this gentleman and received some feedback and some free exchange of information from him. He's just a scholar and a gentleman. He's always there to help those who are anxious or eager to learn, especially about dragonflies. Incredible human being. So a great book. It's a very large, heavy book, but it's got some great detail in it. Easy to use. The next one here is 2 sets of field guides from John C. Abbott. John is a native Texan, or maybe not native Texan, but he did study here in Texas. One of my good friends, Craig Lassie, rented him a room when John was going to University of Texas. And that's what got my friend Greg Lassie into Ognates, but anyway, John has been quite successful. He is behind the Ognata Central website, as well as 2 books. One is Damselflies of Texas. The other is Dragonflies of Texas. The reason he focused on Texas is it's a big state, and that's where he's done most of his studies. And Texas, being as big as it is and being the location we are, we do have the largest number of species from the United States are found in Texas. So if you can cover all of Texas, you've covered a good number of those found anywhere in the United States. There are quite a few, but you're getting the majority if you just focus on Texas. So John C. Abbott, scholar and gentleman, great guy. These are good books. These are really easy to read. A lot of good photographic pictures. A lot of Greg Lassie's pictures are in it, as well as other people I know. And then we have the online resources. Now, these are one of the reasons I got into photography of these old mates is because when I take a picture of them, you are a screen share, yeah. When I take a picture of them, I don't have to ID that thing right there, you know, with a pair of binoculars or a spotting scope. And I probably should change my outline out because I really don't talk about binoculars and spotting scopes other than they're good. If you don't have a camera and you got the time to look, they'll get you up close enough to that dragonfly to really get a good look. But then you've got to memorize that image or have that field guide there looking. And quite often these dragonflies, damselflies don't stay put very long. You know, they'll sit there for a minute or so and then they're gone. So take a picture, bring it home, then you can compare that picture on the computer screen to these other sources. Greg Lassie is a world-renowned wildlife photographer and guide. He has literally photographed animals on most of the continents on Earth. I think there's only one continent, and I can't tell you which one that is. But he's even been to Antarctica, led nature photography hikes in Antarctica. So he's really been around the globe. He has created his own website, greglassie.com, and it contains all the animals and insects that he has photographed over his career. He started out as a police officer in Austin, and then he's done all these phenomenal nature photography since he retired from that police force in Austin. But Greg is a scholar and a gentleman. You'll find everything from butterflies, birds, mammals. He has pictures of jaguars fighting each other in South America. I mean, it is phenomenal. But he has one of the most extensive collections of dragonflies and damselflies, and they're from all over the world that he's actually taken those photographs. Really good resource if you're trying to find a picture of something like what you have a picture of you took. Odonata Central, very good website too. A lot of records there from all over the United States, but it's a little bit more academic as far as it's laid out and its purpose. It's not as easy to use, and it's probably not as socially designed as what iNaturalist.org is. All these people that I've mentioned, I met them through iNaturalist.org. I encourage people when they go to that site to not be a wallflower, just put a picture up there and hope somebody sees it and does it. You know, get out there and look for people who have taken pictures of things like you have and ask them, you know, like if you see a guy that has 20,000 observations, you can pretty much bet that he's probably out in the field every week, if not every day, and probably taking lots of pictures and making lots of identifications. All you have to do is shoot him a message. And the people in the iNaturalist community absolutely love to share their knowledge with people who are curious. So everything I've learned about odonates, birds, you name it, has come from iNaturalist, and of course my relationship with Leela. But when I started this stuff, 10 years ago, I could barely tell you what a bird was. And I certainly couldn't tell you the different species of dragonfly or butterfly were. And today, I feel quite proud when people say, dang, Mike, you ID'd that dragonfly as it flew by and I couldn't even see it. It buzzed by so fast. It was a blur and you just told me exactly what species it was. But it's that thing of practice. The more you look, the more your eyes adjust to looking for those particular things, and the more you will see. So I always say there's a whole new world out there when you start looking at the very, very small. So let's see here if I can get this up. So that concludes my presentation for the evening. I hope I covered everything all the gold that I said at the beginning. I do tend to just speak off the cuff because that's the way it comes out of my heart. And I hope it's been informative for you. I hope it stirs a love for dragonflies and damselflies. And especially, being along Furneaux Creek, I'd like for you to remember that they are indicators of your water quality. You're seeing a lot of dragonflies, you got some good water there. And I hope that with all the efforts that you put into the trails and things, that the dragonflies and things flourish as well. So I appreciate you tonight. Just have a couple of, as we take questions and answers, I'll show some of these different species of dragonflies, but I guess we would be open to questions or answers that you might have at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael.
You bet.
These photos are just fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is a 12.
And I don't know how long it took you just to wait to see these things so that you could get that photo, but they were very good.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, most of it is just being out there. People say, golly, how did you find that? Well, I found it because I go out every day. I hike every day. And most of these, I just happen to walk up on them. And most of these I only saw for 30 seconds or more, and they're gone. So it's not like any incredible knack that I have at finding them. It's just you got to be out there. If you're not out there, you're certainly not going to see them. So that's kind of it. This is a swamp darner pair mating, which swamp darners are usually hard to view. They're up in the shade, not real. They're not publicity hounds for sure. This is what we call a russet-tipped clubtail. You don't see these in north central Texas very much. These are more down around the hill country and south. But we did find one a few years back, and we've seen a few since. But these don't come up to north central Texas very much.
From Lulu Bunton, what brand is the lens kit?
It's called a Copedvic, COPEDVIC. And there again, I've just received this. So if you buy one tomorrow and you don't like it, you can't blame me. I'm still kind of playing with it. But there's a slew of brands. If you go to Amazon, you just type in the search, type mobile phone lens kit.
Okay.
There are literally hundreds, and you can spend as cheap as $5 all the way up to $50. But I think this is kind of middle of the road from what I saw. But I will try to do some more reviews of these things.
Okay. We have another question from Phil Chesmore. How fast do they fly?
Pretty fast. The dragonfly, as I said, they can, like say this dragonfly here, say about 5 inches long. It can fly about 100 body lengths in a second. So that's about 500 inches a second. That's pretty fast. Backwards, it can go about 30 or 40 body lengths per second. So it can fly pretty fast backwards, and they can also hover. Damselflies, they're again much daintier, not near the body size or muscle size. So they just don't have the same speed. They tend to flutter a little bit more like a butterfly would, and they tend to be closer to the ground. But dragonflies, you can see them everywhere from 50 feet up to, inches off the ground, and they are absolute speed demons.
Okay.
The next one was, are they out more at a certain time of day, or are they always out?
Good question. They're always out during the day. They are pretty much what I call solar powered. Once it's dark, you're not going to see them because they're not moving. There are a couple of species called shadow dragons that you will see at night. Like a lot of times we set up a light during the night to do what we call mothing, to attract moths in so we can photograph them. And there are a few species of dragonflies that will come into those mothing screens that we put up, but they're specifically shadow wings. And they're, again, unless you're doing something like that, lighting things up on purpose to attract the insects, you're not going to see them because it's dark. But most dragonflies, almost all of them only appear during the daylight hours. And the best time to photograph and to observe them is in the early morning, from like dawn until probably about, 10 or 11, when the heat starts to increase during the summer. Then they will start to fly, and you'll see them, but they're flying. They just won't stop flying to get a good look at them. So early morning, best time to view them. Daytime is when most of them are observable, but mornings are where they're perching and you can get a good look.
Okay. Next question was, how do you attract them to your yard?
Have some water. And I have no water and I still get them. I've got a creek, Central Park Creek here in Louisville is about 3 blocks over. And I do get some dragonflies sometimes. I've even had a swamp darner in my small, tiny yard. But if you've got a water feature like a small bird pond or, gurgling pond or even bird bath, I mean, I've had friends have dragonflies ovipositing in their bird bath. So water is the attractant. That's gonna pretty much guarantee you're gonna get some in your yard. But if you're anywhere within a mile or so of water, chances are you're gonna see one occasionally within your yard. Main thing is insects. If you got insects in your yard like mosquitoes, that's their favorite meal. So they like preying on those.
Okay, we had another question. What's the lifespan of the adult stage?
Well, that varies by species, and I'm not really well versed on that, but they can live anywhere from a couple of months to a year or more. Whereas the nymphs or the nymph stage, anywhere from 2 years to 7 years.
There was a question from how and where do they deposit their eggs?
Yeah, it's water or just above the water line. Some of them have special appendages that they can kind of drill a little hole into the stem of vegetation and they'll deposit them inside that stem. But it's always very close, if not in the water.
Now, does it have to be moving water or still water will work?
Different species like either still water, like a pond, or some like lakes, or some like rivers or streams. Very species dependent on what kind of water, but it almost always is fresh water.
Okay, so it does not have to be flowing water.
Doesn't, no ma'am.
Okay, that's good to know.
Some prefer that, just those stagnated water. That's what some of them prefer, like the swamp darner. He likes that old stagnated, low, marshy type areas.
Are birds their main predator?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say that's their main predator. They're not all birds are big enough to predate on these. Now, damselflies, they're meals for all birds. I mean, even a small bluebird can eat a damselfly. But, one like we're looking at here, this eastern ringtail, it's going to take at least an American kestrel or bigger to be able to take this down. But American kestrel's not very big, but it's a voracious, it's a small package of dynamite.
I didn't know there's so many different colors.
Oh,
Just kind of cool.
There's about 3,000 species globally. So it's quite extensive. Not quite as many as birds, but there are quite a few and they are colorful. But listen, team, thank you very much. Anytime you want me again, just let me know. I always like to talk. Do a pretty good one now on an advanced iNaturalist on how to data mine and how to actually, look for specific things you're wanting to study as far as numbers or occurrences or regions. So if you'd ever like that, feel free to give me a call. Thank you. Y'all have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
You guys have a great time and
Thank you, Michael.
appreciate your care for nature. Bye-bye.